Hi, this is, my name's Marion Cain, and I am a Master Gardener in Dakota City, Nebraska, and South Sioux, and enjoy going on both sides of the river for working with that. And we have Voices for Food is a committee that was started, I think about 6 years ago, to provide fresh produce for hungry people in our community. And we decided to call it a cooperative learning garden, and we have 2 large spaces that we garden. And so we start lots of the produce indoors this time of year to have it ready for planting out into the garden. Along the sides here you can see most of the things that we've grown before, at least. And I put this slide in just to let you know and remind you that we're gardeners are busy dreaming of our gardens, even when the weather isn't quite cooperating with us for playing outside. And I'm hoping that at least I'll have a little tidbit of information in this session for you. Many of you have lots of experience, and so I'm hoping there will be some little gem that'll be helpful to you at least. These are some of the things that we're going to cover today, from reasons to start your own to what kind of seed starter mix to use and what kind of supplies I like to use. Hardening off your plants, some of the challenges, and hopefully some inspiration. When I saw this picture, I thought that was inspiration for me. It's like a rainbow of greens. Some of the reasons to start your own plants are more varieties. Lots more varieties available when you order your seeds from different places online. It's usually cost savings, and sometimes you can get healthier seedlings, and you're the one that has control of the moisture and the temperature, and you know under what conditions your plants have been growing, and hopefully joy and satisfaction watching them grow under your care. And have extra to share as an added bonus. I've had a lot of fun the last couple of years growing onions, and this is some of the varieties that I can choose from in the long day, which is what's needed in my area. And I usually go on, and there's another chart this company has. This is Johnny's Seeds in Maine, and they tell you how long the storage availability is for them as well after harvest. And so I usually pick the ones that have larger storage potential. Here's their chart that I really like. So the long day are the ones that are right for our area here in the Siouxland area. And you can see on the right, the chart shows you it's by where you live. Lots of information available. So this is how the cost savings comes in. If you buy 1,000 seeds, depending on the variety, it's $650 to $870 for 1,000 seeds. If you buy the plants, you get 50 or 60 plants per bunch for $16.79. And these are just all prices from Johnny's. And if you buy 30 bunches, they have a price break, and it's $93.90. So now every seed isn't going to germinate, but I buy 5 or 6 different varieties, about 1,000 of them. So we get some nice onions. And is it time to start your seeds? The biggest temptation for us gardeners is to plant them too early. It just happens so easy. We're so excited, and gosh, it must be time now, and we put them in, and the next thing we know, we've got tomatoes that are 3 feet tall and no place to put them yet. I just planted, here's a little chart. I really liked when I got this in my email from this company. It's an advertisement to get me to buy seeds, of course, but they also have lots of information and very helpful information for me. That this was how my brain could understand it well anyway. So in this example, May 9th is the last frost date. I would probably consider our last frost date maybe more the 16th, but count back from there by the weeks and figure out from that. This chart it's one of their same pages, and you'll be able to find this in many of the seed companies' information. So you see the most popular thing is tomatoes. Where do you find them on the chart? 6 weeks. Tomatillos, peppers are 8 weeks, and tomatoes are there too. So 6 to 8 weeks. I just planted my tomatoes last weekend. I had planted some others a little bit ahead of that too. So I like to mark my calendar ahead of time, counting back and filling in all the things that I want to plant and which week to do it, and then whatever day that week that it works for me or near there, I'll go ahead and plant. This chart I stumbled on, and it helped really make it clear for me to see what to plant when. And lots of information online at Johnny's and lots of other places about when to plant. And the last year or two, I've worked really hard to try to get 2 rotations so that I can, double crop some things. So they talked about kale and double cropping kale, and so I saved that. A friend gave me this teeny tiny little basil last year. It's just a little mound, maybe 6 inches tall. Fabulous little basil plant. I'm pretty sure she said it was called summer long basil. I couldn't find that from the places I usually get it. There was also Piccolino or Pluto basil. Pluto was the one that I ordered to try growing this again this year. Fennel, last year I started fennel inside and had an amazing crop of fennel. Was really fun, and you can eat the greens and also the bulbous part there at the bottom. And that's the challenge. Grow what you eat and eat what you grow. Had a little, but I like to learn new things. So the fennel was something I wasn't quite so sure how to eat. So I'm going to try it again this year and hopefully eat what I grow this year. But grow the things that you like to eat if they grow in your area. Last year was probably the best broccoli growing year I've ever had. We had 2 varieties. This green mountain broccoli, it had a nice big head, and then the green sprouting calabrese. And it was fun to learn that you can eat those flowers as well, and they're just delicious. The broccoli flowers can just be eaten right along with the broccoli. This year we're growing some creeping thyme to plant in the pathway between stepping stones. And so we hope to divide the little clumps and plant them in the pathways. So some planting thoughts to start thinking about what to plant and what do your the seeds that you're going to plant need. What are the conditions for the best germination? A few plants need, or a few seeds need stratification or scarification. Stratification is a cooling before they'll germinate, and the scarification is kind of a scratching or a scarring of that outer seed coat. An example for the stratification is blue stem. Little blue stem likes to be cooled before it grows. And scarification, one that that we commonly grow is nasturtium, and it helps to use a nail file or something like that to scratch the seed a little bit before you soak it and then plant it. So get to know your plants and what they like, and how deep to cover the seeds, if you cover them at all. Some seeds require not covering and need the light, and then some require covering, like zinnias need to be covered. They need to be in the dark, so they need to be covered with soil. And it helps a lot to label what you plant, because otherwise a bunch of stuff comes up and you can't always remember or recognize exactly what it is. There are garden marker pens, I'll show you more as we go along, that hold their color at least for one season out in the garden. Permanent marker pens do not. And get to know the germination time, what to expect. So if nothing is grown in 3 weeks and it was supposed to be up in 5 days, you know, well, it's probably not going to grow this year. One thing is beet seeds. If you soak them before you plant them for 1 or 2 days in a Ziploc bag with a moist paper towel, you have really much better luck getting them to grow out in the garden. You can start sweet potatoes inside. I started these a few weeks ago, and I'm just noticing the first ones are starting to sprout. So that's very exciting. And one of my friends has sweet potato just right in on her pantry, was starting to grow. So she's going to capitalize on that and go ahead and grow them. Once their sprouts get a few inches long, you can just carefully snap it off and put it in water, and more sprouts will keep coming. And the ones in water will start to make, or into soil, and they can start to root. But they're a very tender crop, so you won't want to plant them outside until the weather is definitely past our last frost, probably the end of May, 1st of June. Here's sweet potatoes growing vigorously, and those little stalks could be snapped off and rooted, and then more will sprout, so you can get a nice little crop. Seed packets are loaded with information. Read them carefully and you will learn a lot. Delphiniums are one of my favorite things to grow. This man, Richard Jaron, has a great Iowa State information here. I have on my wall so I can refer to it anytime I want. It seems like I wrote one other thing along the far side. Can't remember what it is right now, but the first column is what the item is. Second column is if it needs light to germinate or not, so light, and then covered or lightly covered are the L, C, and C. Germination temperature, the ideal one, and then the growing temperature. Crop time. I'd have to study that a little bit again to see if that is probably how long from until you want to plant it outside the way it looks. So pansies, 8 to 10 weeks. So you can plant those when you're really itching to plant something early. Whereas my zinnias, if I'm going to start them inside, I usually wait until almost the 1st of May to plant them. I just printed this out and it's available online. I printed it out and put it right on my wall so I could refer to it anytime I want and add extra notes if I want to. Oh, there was a note. Crop time is a number of weeks from planting the seed until you plant it outside. This is a great extension paper about germination requirements and seed storage. Frequently when I'm buying the larger quantities of seeds like that, I'll not always plant all of them one year. Although I have learned that there's a few, like onion seeds, they germinate the best that one year, and also parsnips are. So it's best to go ahead and use all of those right away the first year. Don't plan on saving them. Planning what to plant. Sometimes this is one of my biggest temptations, because space available for growing, as the plants get bigger and bigger, the space gets smaller and smaller. But fortunately, it won't be too long until we can start planting the onions outside and planting the cabbage and broccoli outside, and then I'll have room for the tomatoes that are now starting to come up nicely. Let's see, moisture. You've got to keep your plants watered, but not too wet. So that's always a challenge, to keep an eye on them. I try to check them twice a day at least, morning and evening, or late afternoon. And if it's, windy or warm like the other day, you've got to remember to take those things into consideration. Temperature for germination, mostly across the board, was 70 to 75 degrees. And I do have a heat mat, but I don't use it very often. Where I start my seeds, it's around 70 degrees, and it just seems to just be perfect. I planted some marigolds just 2 days ago, and they're popping up already today. Availability and cost. So if the plant is not available to you, like one of my favorite things to plant is Lysianthus, and their availability is not, they aren't very readily available around, and they're quite expensive. So if I can raise some myself, I have the bonus of having lots of nice Lysianthus plants. Get to know your plants and the ones you want to grow and what you like. Here's the Lysianthus that I grew a couple of years ago. The lovely thing about Lysianthus is when you pick the flowers to bring them in, they are about as long lasting in the vase as any flower there is, probably close to 10 days, but they're even pretty outside. And there's a beautiful delphinium. So I'm tempting you with the lovely flowers. This, one of the first years I grew delphinium, I had great germination, and I had a big row of them all along the fence. This is my backyard, and I have a strawberry patch, and then there was a gorgeous row of delphiniums until a big windstorm came through. So that's one thing, you do need a little extra support for the delphiniums so they don't blow over. Tomatoes are always a favorite. Just about every gardener is interested in growing beautiful tomatoes. There's hard to beat the flavor of homegrown tomatoes. This is probably one of the nicest tomatoes I have ever grown. I think one slice of tomato filled the whole sandwich, and could probably do 7 or 8 sandwiches with that gorgeous tomato. This is kind of a new thing to me. I don't know how new it is, this Queen series of zinnias. I especially love orange lime, I think it was called. Queen orange lime. I think that's the one I got to plant this year. I'm still saving it. I'm going to try to hold out for a few more weeks before I plant it. And right in the seed catalogs or online, many more, even the companies that send you catalogs, they usually have even more products and information available online. So us gardeners can spend lots of time looking online for that stuff. I thought this was such a true statement. Here's some of the seed catalogs that I enjoy looking at. Hopefully there's one new one there that you might like to order a catalog or go to their website. Probably I get as much as from Johnny's as anywhere. And also I've ordered from Totally Tomatoes. The other two are new, fairly new for me to learn. Baker Creek, we got some things from there last year. And the one has lots and lots of herbs, Richie's. This is how I have 2 of these racks set up in my plant room. And they are still fluorescent bulbs. I bought them just about the time. Now we're transitioning more to LED, and so I would need to do more research before I could really give you much advice on the LED bulbs, but I do know there are LED bulbs available. The important thing is you need to make sure you have the whole color spectrum. With my fluorescent bulbs, I put in those, each of those hold 4 bulbs, and I put in warm, cool, so that you get the whole spectrum of light to help the plants grow their best. This is a little bit of a duplicate seed packet information. You need to read closely and plan when to plant, what to plant. And this was the lots of variable information about how long you can keep your seeds, but not too long, you know, just kind of be careful about it. This is the seed starter mix that I use. I usually go down to a local nursery here. There's one in a small town not far from here that he's willing to sell us bags of the soil, and that's what I use. And I dump the whole bag into this large garbage container because when you get the soil, it's quite dry and you need to get it moistened before you fill your pots. So I usually pour the whole bag in there, and then I use my watering can, and I use warm water and pour quite a bit in, usually my whole little sprinkler can, which holds a gallon and a half or so. And then I'll stir it around. And even if I do that the day before I plant, it gives it more time to soak in and really get, sometimes it's a challenge to get that new soil hydrated. Some planting containers that we used to use quite a lot that was pretty fun was called, we learned about on a place called Bottle Biology, and we used 2-liter pop bottles for this. And you can look online to find it. I've since quit using them for a couple of reasons. One is I've spilled a couple of them, tipped them over, and it seems like it keeps them a little moister than I would like. So I have a little more trouble with things from them being too wet. So I used them for a number of years, and it's definitely a viable option. You can also use all kinds of things that you find at the grocery store. This is a friend of mine is using the containers from rotisserie chicken or from a cake, like a little 9x13 or whatever size those are. The one thing you have to be careful with, no matter what you use, is keeping it the right amount of moisture, not too wet. You wouldn't have drainage holes here, so you got to be careful about that always. I usually buy my supplies from this Farm Tech from Growers Supply, and I like to get the things that all fit together because it makes the best use of my space and works out well, and I can reuse them from year to year. I get trays with lots of holes in for when I have the plants outside hardening off, so that the water, like if it rains, they don't overwater, they, you know, it can drain away. And then when they're inside, I need them in trays with no holes so it doesn't make a mess in my plant room. And there are lots of different sizes of divisions, but this is the one I like the best. It's 48. Seems like if there's smaller than that, they dry out too much, too fast, and I'll lose plants because they dried out more. Here I've got some that I've reused and washed, and some of them are kind of stained, but they're still perfectly usable. This year I saw online about making reusable wooden trays, and my cousin made this one for me. It's 12 by 12, And I started some onions and leeks or shallots in there. So here's how I would set up when I'm planting my onions. I go ahead and make a label and put it right with the packet and get all ready to plant, get my soil ready, and have it right there. The 1,000 seeds, if I sprinkle those out into one whole big flat, it really is working out pretty well. And I use this is the garden marker pen that I get from that same company. So I've sprinkled the packet of seed all over that, and then I cover it with a little bit of vermiculite, which holds the moisture well, and it helps to keep down moss growing and stuff like that. So I'm liking that more and more as I get used to using the vermiculite to cover the seeds and water it. And I love using empty hand dish soap bottle to water until they start to get larger. Pelleted seeds are something you're seeing more and more, both pelleted in the round fashion or pelleted in the little long fashion. The most important thing to remember about that, well, they're handy to plant, so you can plant them easily, spacing them out as you like, especially for things that would ordinarily be tiny. But pelleted seeds, you need to use them within 1 year. Their germination is very poor on subsequent years. Last year I bought, these were a pelleted seed, a really fancy little Salanova lettuce, and I planted 1 seed in each of the squares. And they were, I don't know if I included a picture of them later, but they grew into gorgeous little lettuces. So here's a bunch of probably onions that I've got planted. And I put the dome over the top to keep them moist until they germinate and put them under the light. Here's just a little information about the heat mat. And you can have a thermostat to keep the heat mat at the temperature you like. Some people will set their seeds on their tray of seeds on top of their refrigerator or someplace like that warm, but I would have a hard time remembering to get it down before it got too, not enough light, so that didn't work for me. Here's little onions starting to come up, and then that's when I take the lids off. When I was ordering from Johnny's, I believe last year was the first year I tried it, I saw they sold primed rosemary, and it was supposed to come up much faster, and it did. I was really happy with it. Ordinarily, rosemary takes like 21 days to germinate, and these were up in about a week and did really well. In my plant room, I have a fan that blows off to the side, not straight on to the plants, so that would dry them out too much. And then I also have an air purifier that helps to kind of get the smell of the soil and the different things like that under control a little bit. When you have quite a few plants in one space, both of these are very helpful. Here's a bunch of tomatoes that have come up, and then it's time to transplant them. When they have their first set of true leaves, then I can divide them up so they each have their own space.
Marion, we do have a question, and this might be a good time to ask it. Somebody had said, I planted some marigolds inside. They sprouted right away and then died.
Well, the most common problem there is it's called damping off, and it usually happens because they're too moist. So that's the delicate balance between. And sometimes I blame it on the potting soil. Some of the potting soil doesn't have enough aeration in it, and it has a tendency to be too moist. The seed starting mix, it's a delicate balance and challenging. One thing, did it happen really quickly from the time they started to come up until they died, or how much time?
She said yes. So
yeah.
It happened.
My suspicions, I would blame the potting soil unless you know that you really had the potting soil really super wet. I have trouble with almost all of the ones that I get at the regular box stores and stuff. So I usually go down and see how this soil has lots of aeration pieces in it, perlite and stuff like that. That would be my biggest suspicion. There are a couple other things that you can do to help a bit. One is when you water it with chamomile tea water diluted. So you can Google that and read about it and try it again. I've used it a couple of times when I seemed like I was having a little of that trouble. And I just learned the other week that it's helpful to sprinkle a little cinnamon on the top. And I have not tried that yet. I just read about it and learned that there are some other master gardeners in this area that have had success with that. So try again. Don't be discouraged. I would start with trying some different soil, or if you know you had it pretty wet, try to have the soil not quite so wet. That's one of the really challenging things, but just try again.
Would it, Marion, would it be helpful to add some perlite to the soil to make it a little bit lighter?
You know, that's something that you could do. Yep.
Okay.
I don't always think about that, but I have bought plain perlite and added it myself. That's a great idea. So here's a problem that I encountered this year. See those little aphids on my cilantro? So a good way to handle it, you just got to look at your plants at least twice a day and see, are they happy? Are they starting to die? Are they yellowing? Are they reaching for the light? Are they getting infested with bugs? A little bit of, just in a squirt bottle, I just use an old Windex bottle and fill it with water and put in just a small squirt of ivory soap, dish soap, and just shake it up a little bit, not a lot because you don't need a lot of bubbles, and then spray that on your plants. The challenge there is you need to keep checking back because all it takes is just a few that didn't get killed and they're multiplying again. So once you have them for the year, you'll probably have to keep treating and keep looking for them. It's hard to get rid of every one of those little buggers. This is a pretty handy little pot maker system that lets you use newspapers if you have availability to that, or I suppose you could use any kind of scratch paper and make pots. We did use that with great success last year. I have a few pictures to show you about that. Here, I'm not sure what I grew in these. I remember, I don't know what these plants are. They could be like a little kohlrabi maybe, or something like that. Kind of looks like I hand planted just 2 or 3 in each one. What I really liked them for is for like pumpkins and squash and things like that, because I just like to, the challenge with these is they dry out kind of fast because of evaporation. So you've got to watch that pretty closely. But I like to plant my pumpkins or squash or whatever just almost at this stage. And then this way you can just plant the whole thing with very little disruption to the plant at all. You have to be careful not to leave that paper sticking up above the soil though. So you're going to need to get it either torn off at the top or down enough that it's below the ground, or it'll wick moisture out around those little plants. Here's some lavender seed that I grew one year. Started out and had a really nice little crop of lavender, although in our zone, it's challenging to get it to survive the winter. So, and here's little peppers. When I had started them, quite a few in, like, say, in 1 4-pack, and then I transplant them each into their own home like this for more growing. Now, in the corner, you'll notice there were some that were not as big as others, and I wasn't sure that they were going to do well, so I went ahead and just put 2 in that cell. Sometimes they both do well, and then I can divide them later, and sometimes they don't. Occasionally I'll start, probably when most of my other pots are used up, I'll start in some of these leftover round ones or whatever, but mostly I like to use that same size that fits nicely on my shelves and all works. A friend gave me an amaryllis that had a seed, that he had started from seed, and it had a seed pod on it, and I planted the seeds, and now I have lots of baby amaryllises. That's kind of a fun little thing to do, planting all kinds of seeds. Here's a cold frame. This is my first cold frame that I had. And I quickly learned that you can kill a whole cold frame full of plants if you go to work and leave the lid shut and the sun comes out. So it helps. Now I have a cold frame right beside my work so that I can slip in and out at a moment's notice to open the lid or check on them and close the lid or whatever. I've also used this method. I call it my Conestoga wagons. We've just got a 4x8, I'm pretty sure it is. And then those are PVC pipes and some nice plastic. In windy weather, I've got to piddle with it quite a bit. I blocked, yesterday it was super windy here, and I put some bags of leaves along the sides to try to help keep from losing my plastic. You can't really see it in these pictures, but at the perimeter of the plastic, we've got like a 1x2, and then we rolled it in the plastic and then put another 1x2 on and screwed it in. And so there's one of those, the length on each side, and then on the ends, it's 2 pieces. So you can take that clip off and get in there to water, or you can take the whole plastic off as the days start getting warmer. I'll take the plastic clear off, and it'll be a great place to harden off. I keep that on the north side of the building so it gets some sun in the east and the west, but not so much all day long. So it's a great hardening off place. And there you can see on a not too windy of a day, I'm letting, there you can see the boards along the bottom. I'm letting a little more air in to give it a little more ventilation. And here's a little later in the season when I've put the plastic off to the side and the plants are hardening off, getting close to ready to go into the garden. There they are, all snuggled in. And then my son helped me to make a new and improved cold frame. So this is our newest, most improved version. One of the challenges is when there's snow or rain to not have that board on the bottom of the plexiglass so that the snow or the rain can just slide right off. So that was his invention there. He's a fabulous builder. And here's, so in my cold frames, they are now actually hot boxes, because now we have this long blue heating mat, and it has a thermostat on it. And so if the temperature, and there's a little temperature thermometer probe inside of there, and if the temperature drops below 45 degrees, or I can set it to whatever temperature, but I chose 45, then the mats will start warming. And as long as the temperature is below 45, the mats will warm. And once the temperature is above 45, then they just shut off. And that's been working pretty well, although I have learned that on a cold night like last night, we needed to add an insulation piece. I think I've got a good picture of this. So I have an app on my phone that's connected to the thermometer, one of the thermometers in the hot box. It's the ambient weather. I think it was about $20 or so for the thermometer that linked to the internet, so I can look at it with my computer or with my cell phone and see what temperature it is in the hot box or not so hot box. So here's what it looks like on my phone. And I can see that in my hot box, it was 75 degrees at that time. And here's the modification when it starts to warm up. I put a little rock in there to hold the lid open just a little bit. And as it gets warmer and warmer, like the other day, it was 80 degrees. That was a little bit of a shock for my system. I opened the lids clear open. And then my plants are not this big right now. This is last year or a different year. But I had, I had to really watch them closely because with that hot air that they weren't used to and the wind, I needed to water several times. So here is the modification that we figured out to help get us through the colder nights like we're having several of this week. So we'll be putting the insulation sheets, sliding them in right under the plexiglass. And the nice thing about having the plants is then when you space them out, you can just, you've got a head start and they're nice and neat and organized there in your garden. And there you can see as they've started to grow larger, I believe that's broccoli and kale. And last year I started Swiss chard like in January, and it was just gorgeous, so colorful right at the front door. I really enjoyed it. And then as it got to be time to put it out, I thought, now what am I going to do with that Swiss chard? And I just pulled it apart and planted them in the row there, and they just grew and grew all summer long. And so I've been watching for lots of recipe ideas to use that really nutritious Swiss chard. Swiss chard is so much, it can tolerate the heat better than spinach, but you can use it in anything that you would spinach. Here is towards fall, picking a nice big bunch of Swiss chard. I love the ones, I think it's called rainbow. I can't remember the rest. But you can use the stems too, just slice them kind of thin, and you can add them to soups or saute them or casseroles or whatever. I love this picture with all the different varieties of tomatoes. And your garden doesn't have to be like anybody else's. It can be like your own. Make your own garden, the things that you love to grow. Tall, spindly growth is one problem that frequently people encounter when they're trying to start their own plants. And these are some reasons that you might have that problem. If you just try to grow them in the windowsill, pretty good chance you'll have tall, spindly growth. It's just not enough light. You need something to give you some extra light. And you need to have the light close down to the plants. 4 to 6 inches is ideal. Even when I try to put 4 on a tray, sometimes I'll see the ones on the edge of the tray are having a hard time getting enough light, so I'll rotate them around so that the outer ones are in the middle. If you water too much, is a problem, and sometimes you don't know how much is too much until it's too late. With warmer, if it's too warm where your plants are growing, they have a tendency to get too tall. And if you fertilize them too much, you would be promoting that too. And if they're too crowded, if you should have gotten them transplanted a little sooner. Now here, notice the tall, spindly growth on that one plant. Those are cosmos. Since that time, I've decided and read, and I knew better, but sometimes you've got to try things that might not work just to see if you can make it work. But cosmos really does better if you just plant them outside. Anything else have tall, spindly growth? Maybe the tomatoes, they say, I think it says Parks Whopper, they look a little tall and spindly back there. One thing about tomatoes, when you transplant them from that stage, if you haven't let them get too tall, you can sometimes plant them a little deeper and get by with that. A lot of those needed transplanted and hopefully got transplanted shortly there. One year I tried to grow a lot of flowers and they were tiny and transplanting them was a big challenge. There's, I might have already showed you this picture. There's tomatoes just getting their first set of true leaves, and it would be the stage that I'd like to transplant them to each be in their own. Here they are, done, magic. And you can fertilize with about half strength fertilizer. After the leaves, they've gotten their first set of true leaves. And I think I read that only to do that once every 2 weeks. So you don't need to fertilize just a little bit now and then. It doesn't take a lot. Here's the one that I am currently using. And here's some leeks. One year when I planted the leeks, you can see on the left, I planted a lot of leek seed in that round pot, and then I transplanted them into that. That was fairly tedious, and so I decided then after that to sprinkle them and add them, plant them out into that whole big flat, and then I don't have to transplant until into the garden. With onions and leeks and such, you need to give them a haircut every now and then. Once they start getting so tall they're falling over, then they need a little haircut. And when I trim them, I hold on to the top, cut it off, and then save those trimmings. They are perfect little chives or green onions for anything in cooking. So I've probably 3 or 4 times now trimmed my onions this year. And they're getting close to ready to transplant outside. We thought about doing it this week, but I decided just to wait another week or 2, just to let this weather settle down. So here's my shelves, pretty full. And here's where you can see on the very ends of my trays, they don't get quite as much light as they need, so I kind of rotate the plants in the tray and, take the 2 from the middle, from the edge, and put them in the middle and slide it down. Here's the chamomile tea that you can use. Now I did do that a few weeks ago, and it seemed like I took 2 tea bags and made a big strong cup of tea, and then I diluted that down in a quart or 2 of water, and then just used it when I watered the plants. And I guess I felt like whatever problem I was having at the time, that must have helped, because I didn't need to do it again. Here are little lisianthuses that need to be individually planted into their own. It takes a month or 2 to get them to this stage. So you can see they have lots of roots. Lisianthus is a perennial in the South. And so they do a lot of root growing. And here they are, each in their own little cell now. Occasionally, let's see, did I do it here? If there's one that's a little small and I'm not sure that it'll make it, then I'll put 2 in. Sometimes they both do well. And here I am watering with the dish soap bottle. It's pretty critical with the lisianthus is to get them at the right soil level. You don't want them too deep or too shallow. Whereas some plants, you can plant deeper, and that's a good thing. This is getting to be a time when it's like, okay, I hope pretty soon the weather gets warm enough we can put these things outside. This year I tried a winter gardening in milk jugs and planted some seeds in milk jugs and then just set them outside in the winter weather on the south side of the building. You'll be able to find information about that online. There's quite a few articles available And I had pretty good luck. I think maybe some of my seed was old. This was cabbages or kohlrabi, and they did well. I think I had a pack of Shasta daisy seed and it didn't come up, but I think they were old seeds, so it's not really a fair test for that. This is a perfect application for those seeds that need stratification because they can get a really good natural cooling. And here, after a while, I decided, you know what, I'm going to just move those milk jugs into my hot box. So this picture was taken on March 15th, and I've got my onions are growing nicely. I've got some cilantro, which isn't the best thing to start inside, but you know, sometimes I've just got to try. Hardening off is a process where you gradually give them a little bit more time outside. I like to pick a day for their first day out when it's not going to be too windy or too hot, and I usually start by putting them in the shade and gradually giving them more and more time. This is how a friend of mine plants their tomatoes. They make tomato cages out of rebar, and I love this idea, and I've made a number of them that way. And they also wrap with, oh, I can't remember what it's called now. It's kind of like saran wrap, but it's not quite that. They use it at like Menards and stuff if you bundle up your wood that you buy or something like that. It's just cellophane, I guess. And you can buy it in different widths, and it kind of has a handle on it. So you can just wrap it around and make your own little greenhouse. And they leave that on for until the tomatoes start getting up above it a little bit, but depending on the weather. Once the weather starts getting hot, you better get it off of there or it could magnify it too warm. Don't you just love looking at those little plants happy and growing in their own little rows? I like to garden in, it's called French intensive. So you have a 4-foot strip where you garden, and then you have a pathway that's, say, 3 foot. And then another 4-foot strip. And that really works well. So you can try not to walk in your gardening beds at all. Pretend they're raised beds. Try not to walk in the garden part of it and only on the sides, and you can reach in from both sides. So this is how my garden looks as it's getting a little bigger. Kohlrabis have been a really fun thing to grow. When I transplant my kohlrabis, I'll put 2 in each of the cells, and then when I plant them out, they're just 2 by 2 by 2, and they can kind of grow just side by side. The challenge is you can't pull it out to harvest it. You want to cut it off then, because if you do, if you pull it out, you'll pull both out because their roots become intertwined pretty much. A friend of mine started nasturtiums inside this year, which reminds me to tell you this is one that needs scarification. And it works best to give it a little scraping on a nail file or something like that. It doesn't take a lot. And then just drop it into a glass of water and let it soak overnight, and then plant them the next day. Nasturtiums are not a big fan of being transplanted, so it's better to just put 1 or 2 in each of the cells, and then when you plant them, you just plant that cell out and you don't disturb the roots much. And I've had really good luck doing that, and my friend is having great luck. Look at those beautiful things. And here were the melons that I was getting ready to plant last year. This is, I wouldn't let them get much bigger than that if I just start them inside, and 1 or 2 weeks and they're ready to be planted. So I've already planted lots of other things in the garden before I've even started my squash or pumpkin seeds inside. And here's how we planted them outside. when I ordered this plastic, I thought it was going to be black on one side, white on one side. That was misinformation. And the problem with white plastic is the weeds grow under it just terrible. So last year, and the other problem is it blows away. The first year we did it, we had a really windy day, and the next day it was all blown off. So this year, right away, this last year, in other words, we used a lot of mulch, leaf, grass clippings to help hold the plastic down and keep the light out. So that's helps with our weed control. Here's the little Lisianthuses. The best to plant Lisianthus in even December. They're very slow to grow, and here they are, pretty much ready to go outside into the garden. They're sitting on my deck, still hardening off a little bit, waiting for me to plant them. And here's the row. When I planted them, a good friend of mine told me about this easy straw. It makes, you can buy it, I think it was somewhere in the $12 to $17 for this big bundle, and it goes a long ways. And you just put it down between your plants, and then there's a little tackiness in there, so if you want to water with your hose, just a little sprinkling, that'll help keep the mulch right in place, and it looks really nice and helps prevent water loss and weeds. Win, win, win. I love this quote from Maya Angelou. And here's our onions as they're getting bigger and bigger. Now, can you see the pathways? Yeah, I think sometimes we have 2 rows and sometimes there's 4 rows, and then there's a pathway. And here's the garden as it's getting bigger. And you can see where we work really hard to mulch to try to keep down the weeds and make our lives easier. I think this was taken last year because that looks like broccoli there. Last year was a gorgeous broccoli and cabbage year. Here are the onions harvested and drying in the garden shed out there. And after we harvested the onions, I saw that great mulch, and I thought, you know, this seems, let's see, I looked it up. It was July 26th. And I thought, yes, I think we can second crop this. And so there's a really neat little hoe that's like triangle shaped. And I just hoed down that row, and I sprinkled carrot seeds down all those rows and watered them. The most important thing with carrot seeds, it's the same as lawn grass seed. It needs to stay moist for 10 days. So in July, you're probably going to have to water twice a day, a little bit. You've got to keep that seed moist for at least 10 days. And there is our gorgeous crop of carrots. And on this day, November 1st, I was planting garlic right beside the carrots. And then we harvested the carrots pretty close to this time. Here's some of them. They're orange and variety and a purple variety. Inspiration is what I hope that I've given you, some inspiration, some kinds of ideas of something new that you can plant, something that you can have better luck with. One year I had okra seed, and if I have seed, I have to plant it. But this is another one of those things that I really didn't know too much about what to do with okra once I had it, but it grew and grew and grew, and it seemed like I had to harvest every day. It grew so fast, and it grew so tall I could barely reach to the top to pick all of them. It was just a smashing success, but I didn't know what to do with all those okra. I love teaching people about ripe peppers. When I was helping with the school gardening class, I learned that ripe peppers are way more nutritious than green peppers. So let them get ripe if you can. At the end of the season, pick all the green ones and eat them too. But the ripe peppers are much more nutritious, higher in vitamins C and A. Dehydrating tomatoes, it's a wonderful thing. One of my friends taught me recently, and they're so good when they're still warm from the dehydrator even. This is something that we've had a lot of fun making, is ratatouille, and watching the movie of Ratatouille. And here's my granddaughter helping make ratatouille from the vegetables that she helped pick from the garden. And ratatouille is a vegetable stew from the Mediterranean coast of France. And just for fun, last year, I thought I would try some tomato grafting. And so this is just a picture of some of the supplies, and I was working away at that here. Up from the Earth and Voices for Food, I want to encourage you to plant, grow, and share. Grow an extra row to share at the pantry or with a neighbor or at your church. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, Carol?
There is. Let me go back and look. Linda would like you to tell us again the purpose of the chamomile tea.
Well, chamomile tea can help with dampening off, or if you have any problems with fungus, or, you know, like if your plants are just like dying when they barely got started, maybe you might see a little brown on the stem and then they just conk over. And the other thing, now that you know the chamomile tea idea, Google it, read more, see what you can learn.
We did have somebody ask a little bit about what you did with all the vegetables, and I answered with Voices for Food. But would you tell a little bit more about, I would think people were wondering if you do this all yourself or if you have volunteers come in. Would you talk just a little about that?
So we've had this cooperative learning garden in South Sioux for, I believe this is the 6th year. I need to double check. It started out because of a realization of food insecurity, that there were people that weren't getting especially fresh produce. The food pantries mostly have processed, canned foods like that. And there was a grant for Brenda tells much more about it in a better way, but there was a grant for 5 or 6 states were available, offered to money to help fund it. And so we got money for seeds and some of those propagating trays and things like that. And we grow the food and share it with the gardeners, and we share it with the food pantry. So anybody is welcome to come and help in the gardens. And the one garden is right behind where I work, and it's it's available. I'm available to slip in and out to help supervise somebody in the garden. So most any day they could come to work in the garden if the weather is the biggest determinant. Let's see, last year we had 100 different people to help at least one time in the garden. So I wrote them, I wrote down their hours and tried to keep track of that. Now, Brenda made a nice little paper about the statistics each year, and I'm pretty sure that's available. Carol, could you tell them about how it's available? It's on your website, I think, isn't it?
I do believe it is. Dakota.unl.edu. I'll put that in the chat in here just a little bit. But the original grant for this was a 5 or 6 state extension grant through the University of Nebraska. South Dakota was part of it, and I don't remember the other states. And so they had seed money to start figuring out in a local community how to have people eat more produce that were using the food pantry systems. And so a council was put together, and this was one of the things that that council has done through that. And now they are self-sufficient with local grants and a variety of other funding. And so if you go to our website, we're on the Voices for Food side. The Iowa side is Up from the Earth. And if you saw Randy Burnite, if you were here when the video first started, Randy Burnite is on our committee for the garden show, and he really is the powerhouse behind the Up from the Earth. But yeah, they would love to have anybody come and volunteer for either of those programs. You can contact Caitlin if you want to do the Up from the Earth, and she can get you in touch with Randy. You can contact Dakota County Extension, either myself or Brenda Sale, who works in our office. And if you contact me, I'll get you in touch with Brenda. And so, yeah, Caitlin just put the Up from the Earth information there, and I'll try to do that with Dakota County. We do have a few more questions, Marion, if we could move on to those.
Sure.
So, wondered if you had any, let me go up so I don't miss any recommendations for flowers to, and I'm assuming that means to start ahead of time.
Well, I like to look at what's your favorite flower to grow. I like to grow flowers that, well, can that person just answer any of that questions? Do they have any special things they want to grow or any special ideas that they want?
Let me look and see who it is to see if I can unmute them. Hang on just a minute. Okay.
I like to grow things that grow easily. Zinnias are one of my favorites, and I love those delphiniums, although they're not super easy. The wind is a big problem.
So Kerr, if you're able to talk, ask that question, you can talk to Marion and tell her.
Yeah, I just wanted to do some flower gardening as well, and I didn't know what would be worth starting indoors or what I should just direct sow.
Are you in this area? Are you in the Siouxland area?
Yep.
Okay.
Northwest Iowa.
So my zinnias, I like to start them inside, but I haven't started them yet. I probably will wait even until almost the 1st of May. I've just planted marigolds. I like to start them inside. Some years I've done cosmos. No, not cosmos. Let's see.
No. Yeah.
Cosmos is the one I decided I like to plant outside.
Yes, low maintenance.
Pardon me? Say that again.
I think she talked about maintenance. The other thing I know I've started inside is marigolds.
Yep, marigolds. And is it celosia? It's called coxcomb. I start that inside. What else did I start inside? Lysiantha. What else? Last year I started a few perennials inside. Since I've got this big vegetable gardening project, I don't do as many flowers, and my flowers get neglected. Salvia, I did start some salvia inside. I really like it a lot. What else? Salvia.
As you think of more of those, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the next question because we do have several of them.
Okay.
About your wooden starter box, your homemade wooden starter box, can you describe it a little bit and talk about how the water drains out of that box?
The bottom of the box is little slats. I think I might have seen the idea on Martha Stewart. And my cousin made this. I'd say it's 1.5 to 2 inches deep. He used cedar. I think he had some cedar wood. He's quite an accomplished woodworker. And he made a little groove where those bottoms slide in. Now that first one he made for me 12 by 12, and afterwards we decided to make it so that it would fit inside of the black waterproof tray, because once the soil dries a little bit and then you water it, it has a tendency to go through and not soak up. You know how the soil sometimes doesn't want to take water. So it helps a lot to be able to set it in the waterproof tray inside. So he modified the next ones he made for me. He made so they'd fit right into that tray. And did I have a picture of any of those? Maybe. Probably didn't really look at it, but I'm liking them pretty well. It's something different than I've used before. So, you know, I'm used to using the plastic ones with their little cubes. So it's taken me a little getting used to this. I just planted my tomatoes last weekend in little rows in one of those. So now probably next weekend I'll need to transplant all those little tomatoes into their individual trays.
All right. Another question about the name of the Pro Mix starting soil that you used. And Jenny did answer that she's gotten it at a greenhouse in Siouxland.
Yep. Yep. And they actually have a different brand this year. So if they want to contact Siouxland, if they live in this area, he's very kind about selling it to us. So I think he would.
Then you have a question about the Iowa State Extension Service recipe for potting mix, and is that okay to use to start plants?
I bet it is. One time, quite a few years ago, I think I tried that recipe. It's quite a bit more work, and since I can get a hold of this potting soil from Siouxland so handily, that's the easiest and best thing that I have used so far. So I will continue to do that as long as I'm able to.
Yes, the Iowa State just kind of gives you tips on if you want to kind of create your own mix at home on equal parts of loam and peat moss and perlite in there for all that drainage stuff. So I'm going to put the link for that in the chat real quick for you guys.
Great.
Is there any other questions? Marion, if you want to go ahead and unshare your screen, can't remember if Caitlin has something she wants to share now. I do know that she would like everybody to do the evaluation. She's put that in the chat box several different times, and I'm sure she'll put it in the chat box again. And let's see, I think we have one more question out here. Hang on. Oh, here it is. Judy wanted to know, does treated wood of the cold frame outgas and affect the plants?
I did not use treated wood. I think that might be cedar. I think we use cedar in the newest versions of the cold frame. I have not ever used treated wood. I don't use treated wood in any of my cold frames, or I mean, it's a decision you have to decide if you want to do that or not. And I decided not to.
All right. We did have another person say that you could get large quantities of Pro Mix at LNG Products in Storm Lake. So if you're close to that area, you might check there for that.
Good to know.
All right, I just wanted to pop on and show you guys the schedule. Next week, we're going to have Renee Swears. She's going to be doing cooking with herbs. And then we'll also have Lena Rodriguez. She's going to be talking about morels, false morels, and other wild mushrooms. I just wanted to remind everyone that Lena's presentation will not be posted to the public for that. So make sure that you jump on for sure for that one. Then I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for joining us today. Make sure that you do fill out that evaluation. It's extremely helpful, especially in changing times like this and trying out the virtual show. I think it will be nice to know if this is something you guys like, and maybe we can kind of continue on just kind of throughout the year with a couple sessions like this. So make sure that you do copy and paste that link over into a separate browser for that. But that, I believe, is all I have, unless there's anything else that you wanted to add, Carol.
I think we're good. We'll give people just a little bit of time to copy that link out before we close this Zoom up. And we've had a couple of people say thank you. So thank you, Marion, for joining us and sharing all that knowledge. I know you grow a lot of plants every year, so we appreciated you.
A lot of fun. Thanks.